What's going on, guys? It's Walid here with Brian. It's the Occupy Fantasy video edition of this podcast for week 17. What's up, Brian?
Well, Lee, what's happening, man? How you feeling? I know you're a little under the weather, so way to power through it.
Yeah, man, I got, unlike Cole Beasley here, I'm not going to take week 17 off because of an illness. But, yeah, I've been fighting through it. I think everyone is, especially around where we live, where one day you get 50-degree temperatures. The next day it's like 10 degrees below. So, yeah, just fighting through it. Got to get ready for the new year. So, no complaints, man.
Yeah, I know, ready to get this new year started, and what a way. Week 17, as always, always tricky, and it's different than every other week. So, you and I would go through every week and we talk about the top plays and all this stuff. But I mean, the line movement this week, the playing time,
Right.
everything is just really, really crazy. And, it's just a different beast than the regular season in general.
Yeah, completely. A lot like preseason. We've obviously made that comparison a handful of times, and massive line movement when, the day, 2 days before the game, you find out a few key guys aren't playing. A lot of coaches kind of, play it close to the chest until you get, team sources that say so-and-so is not going to play, right? So, a lot like preseason, man. You got to make sure you're on top of who's in, who's out. You can't have one of these high-priced guys in that plays a quarter, and then all of a sudden, you're left to kind of ride that out.
Yeah, so definitely be careful of that. And in this week's daily plug, I tried to do a good job of detailing who's in and who's out. It really switched up the format this week. Well, for one, it's 100% free. So anyone who wants to check out our daily plug, it's free for week 17 for NFL. And really just started by breaking down the line movement for each game. And we'll talk about here on the podcast too. But then different situations to capitalize on, where starters are being rested, who has what to play for, et cetera. Because a lot of times it's not really just finding out who's going to play, but as you and I both know, finding out the motivation for each team, because some teams are fighting for a playoff spot, some teams are eliminated, and we don't know how they'll respond.
Right, exactly. And it's very important to be aware of playoff scenarios, right? Because what can happen is now the NFL's gotten much better at scheduling games on week 17 in a consistent fashion. So you don't have like for instance, let's take the Panthers Falcons game and the Saints Bucks, right? That has a lot of NFC South implications there. If they played at different times, all of a sudden Panthers lose, right? That changes what the Saints are going to do. Now they're playing at the same time, but definitely be mindful. NFL.com, you can look at all the playoff scenarios. Me personally, if I'm going to roll out a player that is pricey, right? Like most of the studs, you're going to want to make sure that player has something to play for and isn't at risk of getting yanked by halftime.
Right, that's the biggest thing. It's not so bad if you have a low dollar guy who may or may not play, and you're playing high risk contest. That's fine. But if you're not playing Kareem Hunt and he plays a quarter, really can tank your entire lineup. So
Yeah.
uh,
Or if you're playing Kareem Hunt in general, he can.
yeah, that's a different story, I guess. But yeah, I know this slate can be overwhelming for some people. 16 games. Most of the time we talk about the main slate, and it's 10, 12 games, and but with no Thursday games, no Saturday games, no Monday, no Sunday night games.
Right.
Everything's on one slate. So what advice would you give for people who are playing the main slate, or maybe even to kind of make it more manageable, breaking it down into the smaller slates?
Yeah, I mean, that's the advice right there, right? You don't have to kind of attack the whole day. You can break it down. I mean, if you look at the afternoon only slate, you have 6 games, right? I'm sorry, 8 games, which is 9 games. So I'm like, it's a lot. It's very different than Sunday. So attack this as 2 different slates, and that way, it's just easier on the mind because it can be really overwhelming looking at every single one of these games on the main slate. That's my best advice there is to break it down, enter 2 different slates.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And, you can make multiple lineups or whatever you want to do, but really breaking it down really helps you. Because there's some, maybe it depends on the type of player you are, as we always come back to this from the ultimate guide. Depends on what type of player you are. If you're okay with taking risk, you can play one of the slates that has teams that don't have much to play for, or if you want to lock in some guys are going to get playing time, you can play the slate that has more teams fighting for playoff spots. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. And hopefully as you listen through this podcast, you'll get a sense of the best situations to play, and then you can act accordingly with your contest selection.
Well, let's jump right into it. The first game, Packers versus the Lions. The obvious news for Green Bay, Davante Adams just got that massive deal. We'll save you guys all back and forth. I'm sure you and I will disagree on was he worth it, but a lot of guys out. Davante Adams, Jordy Nelson, both out, right, for the Packers. The Lions in playoff contention. So they do have the fourth highest implied team total, but what do you make of kind of that get me up here? Week 17, division rival, you're not really playing for much. Are you at all concerned about rostering anyone in Detroit?
I would be, and especially given the news that came out, I think it was today or yesterday, that Jim Caldwell may or may not come back next year. It doesn't look like he will come back because they missed the playoffs. I mean, you just have to – it's hard for any player to get up after being eliminated literally the week before. So now you have nothing to play for whatsoever. Nobody on the other side is playing. So it's really tough. So you mentioned Davante Adams out, Jordy Nelson out. Obviously Aaron Rodgers on injured reserve. He's out. Aaron Jones is out. I mean, just tons of guys out for the Packers. But despite all these injuries, which is interesting to me, is that Green Bay's team total is up a half point, and the spread has dropped from that key number of +7. They're down to 6.5 point underdogs, and they're only getting 38% of the bet. So clearly, it looks like sharp bettors are on Green Bay in this spot. Who are you looking at if you're willing to play somebody from that side?
Well, if we're talking Green Bay, obviously with Aaron Jones out, you're going to get a massive workload for Jamal Williams, who's priced $5,200 on DraftKings, and his price has moved up on FanDuel, right? So obviously kind of aware of what's going on there. That's probably where I'm looking at, considering Detroit gives up second most DraftKings points to running backs. Although on the other side, like I didn't want to get too ahead of myself, I'm not completely discounting the Lions here and Matt Stafford. This might be just a hunch, and the logic here is, look, everyone for some reason or another thinks the Lions don't have anything to play for, right? But let's be honest, this is one of those rivalries, right? Like, these teams don't like each other. The Lions have been kind of the little brother that gets picked on, and they've had very little success against Green Bay this past decade. And just the type of guy Matt Stafford is, it's hard for me to see him just kind of take the L at home and half-ass it. I think at least offensively, guys like Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, I expect them to give a full-pledged effort, if maybe just for Caldwell, and saying, hey, look, we haven't quit on you.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. And just given how poor Green Bay's secondary is, you have to look at Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay specifically on the outside. Marvin Jones, I think, is top 5 in our model this week. And Kenny Golladay, he played 95% of the snaps last week. TJ Jones is on injured reserve, which means that wide receiver 3 job opened up. And Golladay got 8 targets. His box score didn't really reflect his playing time, which is why his price is so cheap this week, and which is why he'll be pretty low owned. But, he seems like the perfect week 17 type of player where you get a younger guy more involved with nothing to play for. So I like him a lot this week, especially in tournament.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I like him a lot. Like you said, 95% of the snaps, 8 targets. The production wasn't there, so maybe ownership will be a little off him. But TJ Jones on IR. Marvin Jones does have everyone has a great matchup on Detroit as far as their receivers go. So, for the most part, in a nutshell, I like Stafford and Kenny Golladay in higher risk contests. I also like Jamal Williams pretty much, I'd say, in most contests, right? I keep an eye out for line movement if anything else changes with this Green Bay O-line as far as injuries go. But other than that, not too much I'm pressed for in this game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I am a little bit, if you're playing multiple lineups, and I'm thinking in the numbers of 10 or 20 lineups, I do like taking a shot on some of these Green Bay receivers, especially Randall Cobb or Michael Clark, who is the former basketball player that the coaches seem to love. He got some playing time last week. He should play almost every snap this week, and he's minimum price, at least on DraftKings. So guys to take a flyer on if you're going receiver, opposite receiver stack, or if you're looking to pair up a receiver with a Stafford stack. So
Yeah.
Cobb should see a ton of targets with all those other guys out. So I like both of those guys for higher risk. And I think that'll be a theme throughout this podcast, right? It's higher risk contest because of the uncertainty of this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking more at it, I do like Randall Cobb either with a Stafford Galladay lineup or Stafford Marvin Jones kind of run it back. Like you said, no Devontae Adams, no Jordy Nelson. He is going to be their best receiving target on Sunday.
Yep, totally agree.
Bears versus the Vikings. The Bears have the lowest team total on the board at just under 16 points. Vikings here. They are playing for a first-round bye, right? So, in other words, they have a lot to play for, and I'm not worried at all about their starters playing time.
Yeah, they should play their guys a full go. I just don't see much in this game to really get excited about. The Bears' defense is, they're pretty solid, surprisingly. They're a top 15 or top 17 in DVOA on in both rushing and passing defense. I don't know. Maybe Adam Thielen here, but I'm just not sold on anybody else. I like a lot of the other spots on this slate, even in the early games, where I wouldn't really force anyone from this game.
Right. It's a strange game, right? Because on one end, look, you look at this money line. If you want to, and last I checked, in fact, I think the Bears team total has dropped even more. They're at 13.25, which is nuts.
God.
Yeah. So anyway, the plus 500 on the money line. If you want to throw some money on the Bears and piss it away, there you go. But what do you think of this though? Right. So the Vikings, they have everything to play for, right? The Bears, you could say they got nothing to play for. What does that change though? It is once again Week 17 division rival, right? How much do you think the Bears, want John Fox, Mitch Trubisky, Jordan Howard want to spoil this for the Vikings?
I don't know how much John Fox wants to spoil it because I just don't think he cares about much. But Trubisky and the other guys, I'm sure they would want to spoil something. You always get fired up for your rival, even if you have nothing to play for, to kind of knock them down a peg. So sure, I can certainly see that. And, Chicago's got a lot of young guys who are hungry and fighting. So yeah, I could certainly see that, and that's potentially one of the reasons why the spread in this game has dropped because. The Vikings opened as 13-point favorites. Now they're 12-point favorites. That's a 1-point drop in the spread. A little bit of reverse line movement because they're getting 60% of the bet. So I could see that. I just don't know if anything fantasy-wise will come from this.
Yeah, no, I agree. Honestly, this is one of those games I'm very kind of meh on. The Bears have a way of kind of just depleting the opposition's fantasy assets, and we've seen this from time to time. Early in the year, you think, hey, great matchup. They get the Bears. Next thing you know, they have 4 targets later. Not so great of a matchup. So really the only person I like here is Adam Thielen, considering he'll get a chance to attack the Bears' weakest spot, which is in the slot. And other than that, like you said, they're surprisingly solid on D. This game has one of the lower, if not the lowest, game totals, and I'm staying away for it for the most part.
Yeah, too many other good spots to really try to stack this game. So yeah, I think we can move on to the next one.
Texans versus the Colts. TJ Yates back at the starting helm.
Oh my God, what a disaster! What was it? It was the Christmas Day slate. I had nothing to do. Didn't really want to hang out with my family too much, so I was played some NFL DFS and played the 2-game slate and decided to go with TJ Yates and never again. Just a miserable performance. And now he's going to be without DeAndre Hopkins this week, who's missing his first NFL game. It doesn't seem like a serious injury. Just got a calf, nothing, no reason for him to play. So I'm not sure how the Texans score any points here.
They might not, man. And they're playing the Colts, right? So anytime you say something like that against the Colts, it's awfully concerning. Boy, I got to say, there's really not much for me to talk about in this game outside of T.Y. Hilton, who's made a career out of lighting up the Texans, and I think he had 175-2 in their last meeting. Texans absolutely awful against the pass. In fact, I think, as you noted, they have allowed the most 40-yard completions, right? And anytime I think of T.Y. Hilton delivering in fantasy, it has a big bomb in it. So that's probably the only thing I like here, no one on the Texans. I mean, look, Alfred Blue got 60% of snaps last week. He outtouched Lamar Miller 16-11. But in order for him to really have value, you need to look at a positive game script, right? And I like you said, I don't see the Texans putting up 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't either. And, with Blue, he's not going to do anything in the passing game, right? You're going to need him to hit 100 yards in a touchdown for him to hit high-risk value, and that's going to be a tough sled. Just as we talk about other games here, they're much better replacement running backs who are starting this week or getting a lot of playing time in his price range. I just like a lot more that I don't think you need to on a team where the line movement is so unfavorable against them. I mean, the spread has moved 5.5 points in Indy's direction. I don't know if that's ever happened for Indianapolis. I mean, that's just a ridiculous line move in general, especially considering no starters are being rested or whatever it may be. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is worth 5.5 points to the line. So
maybe
there's something
maybe
else.
a few though. No, I hear you.
Maybe he is. I don't know. That's a big move for receivers. What I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
I like Brissett here. Brissett and Ty if we're going to stack it up, save some money.
Sure.
But in our ownership projections, T.Y. Hilton's going to be pretty highly owned considering his lack of production over the last few weeks. So I don't know how to handle that to play for someone with his skill set and the state of this offense to get 20-25% ownership. I'm not sure how I feel about that though.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? And we'll see. I mean, I'm going to give exposure to Hilton. I just think he's in too good of a spot to pass up on. But like you said, a lot of people will be on him. So Brissett is a great way to differentiate, as not as many folks will be on Jacoby. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And with so many with 16 games, especially, you can get. You can find some low-owned guys. If you do play T.Y. Hilton, you can find some ways to differentiate the lineup. I'm not that worried about it.
Absolutely. Browns versus the Steelers. Huge line movement with a lot of the Steelers starters out. Cleveland went from being a 12-point underdog to now only a 7.5-point underdog. So, although, it is the Browns and they are winless, will they pull off the Detroit Lions 0-16 magic season?
Is Hugh Jackson still coaching?
Last I checked, he was still employed.
So I will say that we'll go 0-16. Even against Landry Jones and company.
Goodness.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh's team totals dropped 6 points now, down to 21.5 points. Cleveland's team totals up 1.5, which isn't saying much. It's still at 15 points.
Right.
The weather is something to monitor here. It's going to be close to 15 degrees around game time, which is, normally we don't worry about temperature for passing games, but when it gets below freezing, especially close to zero, passing dies down a bit. And with Landry Jones under center and Deshaun Kaiser, I think we'll see a ton in the run game here. The total dropped, obviously, in this game. I think if you're going to look at this game, the run games are where you want to look. There's going to be some value here somewhere. We remember what Isaiah Crowell did week 17 last year, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting spot to play him in. There isn't – look, this is one of those games, once again, it's just yucky. I personally don't like anyone at all. There's just no one I'm excited about, quite frankly. You can talk Stephen Ridley, Vance McDonald, right? Some very low price guys. I just don't see it. I don't see it personally, man. Like, I'm literally picturing a 12-9 game here. And Isaiah Crowell, he did come up big last year, week 17. So I could see him working his way into a few lineups, but for the most part, I'm just staying clear of this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Crowell a little bit more than you do. Ridley, I like the price, and he did get 9 carries last week in relief of Le'Veon Bell. So I would think he would see the majority of the running back touches, but it's still a tough matchup. We've talked on this podcast many times before how Cleveland is pretty tough against the run.
Right.
I do like Vance McDonald a lot. One thing we do know is you can beat Cleveland with a tight end, and he was running a ton of routes the last couple of weeks, and Jesse James is basically in a blocking role now. I like it. Minimum price $2,700 on DraftKings or whatever he is, $2,500. I like him, but like you said, just divisional game, cold weather. two awful quarterbacks. Really not a lot to get excited about.
Right. And what's funny is we transition into the next game, which is the Jets versus the Patriots, right? The Steelers technically can still lock up the number 1 seed in the AFC, right? So the fact that they're resting their starters, what does that show more of to you? Does it show you that they just don't respect the Browns for shit? Or does it show you that they just don't think there's any way the Pats are going to lose at home to the Jets, fighting for that first seed?
Yeah, I think it's that one. I think they don't respect the Jets for shit against the Patriots. To be honest, yeah, I mean, they can still probably beat the Browns with their backups, but I mean, just seeing that the Patriots are 17-point or 16-point favorites at home against the Jets, I don't think, just given the two combined, pretty minuscule chance, not worth risking Big Ben or Le'Veon.
Right.
But this Pats game, I mean, another line movement that is kind of head scratching. The team total for New England's dropped 2 points. Mm-hmm. But the Jets team totals dropped too. The under is a lot of money coming on the under in this game. And I would think it has something to do with the weather, cold weather.
Right.
Another 10-degree type of game. Brady being old hasn't been the same fantasy guy we've seen over the second half of the season. So I think the run game should dominate here on both sides.
Right. It's going to be pretty windy too, right? I think anywhere from 10 to 20 mile an hour winds, that could have an effect into it. Like you said, Brady, look, we love Tom Brady, but the numbers don't lie as far as what he's kind of done late December relative to earlier in his career. This just bodes well for the run game. And with Mike Gillislee, Rex Burkhead out, James White kind of questionable. I don't know if he'll be good to go. Dion Lewis is in line for another massive workload. Hopefully you guys had him last week. We were preaching all week. This is the chalk play you got to get. And he was lower owned than we expected, but all over him tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, I think you have to be. James White, even if he does play, he'll likely be limited. But the big deal here is that Burkhead and Gillislee are out, and those guys were playing the goal line role. Right. So now Dion could potentially get red zone looks as well. I mean, you look at last week with the depleted backfield, even though Gillislee did play, he got 7 red zone looks, which is obviously a season high. Played 75% of the snaps, got 5 catches, 29 touches. As Matt,
he got the revenge touchdown against his old team too.
Oh, he did, yeah. And so his price doesn't really reflect his role, and he's probably the top play out of any player on the board this week.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I don't think there's anyone else I really want to mention here. But Dion Lewis, get as much exposure to him as possible. He's been phenomenal, and Gillislee, Burkhead, it's such a big boost to him. And he's not someone that has needed the red zone work to have validated his price point, and now he's going to get it.
Yep. The only other thing I would look at here, well, I guess Gronk too. Gronk is, 2 touchdown favorites. He's in line for a big game here against the Jets, and he has some incentives in his contract.
Right. If he catches 3 touchdowns or something, he gets $5 million. What was that? I got to look that up because
I know it was 11 catches or 115 yards. He gets a big bonus. While you're looking at it, the other guy I would look at here is Bilal Powell. Matt Forte didn't practice, and being a veteran, Week 17 meaningless game. We'll see if he guts it out. He's done it the last few weeks, but if he doesn't practice, if he doesn't play, I like Bilal Powell a lot. We know the Pats can be beat on the ground, and Bilal went for 19 last week. So, I like him too, and I think he'll be pretty low, really low owned actually, especially if the news breaks on Sunday morning. Good
point, right? If Forte doesn't go, Bilal Powell will get majority of the work. He's shown that, and it's something that if you've been following our Occupy podcast throughout the season, we're in general very high on Bilal Powell. It's just that his usage has been so unpredictable this season. It's turned a lot of people off. On weeks you think he'll finally get his share of action, he doesn't. On times you think he won't. Well, it's just very hard to project. So in that case, Week 17, why not, right? Roll him out.
Yeah, he seems like the Week 17 type of back. If you looked at our Twitter earlier in the week, we tweeted out last year's top 12 running backs in Week 17. It just littered with guys who have no fantasy relevance now. Just real week 17 heroes. So especially at running back, receiver, quarterback, tight end, not so much. Those guys stay pretty consistent week 17, but running back is where you see a ton of guys creep into the top 12 who never made an appearance throughout the season. So that's the position we want to look to find the gems this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Redskins versus the Giants. Good news about this game is, unlike last year's Week 17 game, this matchup can't piss me off because there's nothing to play for, right? There's none of this. Redskins need to win to get in the playoffs and lose to the – let me take a deep breath. I'm not feeling well, man. So, yeah, Redskins, Giants, classic dozer of a game, 20 degrees. It'll be windy. I think it'll affect the passing game. Samaje Perine, full practice. He looks like he'll be good to go. The Giants, I mean, they're an absolute mess with all this Eli Apple stuff and Landon Collins and their entire secondary being in the news for all the wrong reasons. Puts Josh Doxson in a pretty interesting spot. What do you think?
Yeah, so Janoris Jenkins is on IR. Eli Apple suspended. Dominic Ryder-Cromartie, they're playing him less and less. They're trying to get looks at these other guys. So really just playing three guys I've never heard of at cornerback. And so Doxson, he's actually played 100% of the snaps in 4 of his last 5 games. Got 13 targets last week, but it was against the Broncos, a tough matchup. Didn't really put up the numbers he could have. Only 2 catches, but it turned into a touchdown. But at his price and given the likely matchup and the likely workload, he seems like a very high upside play to me. You're the Redskins whisperer here. What do you think?
I wish I was that, man. I don't think I am, but I like it, right? I think it's a good, as we're going to keep saying, high risk, high reward play this week. But really, I don't really like too much else in this game. It just these two teams, we saw what happened when they played with all their starters, right? A few weeks ago. It was a very ugly game. I expect more of the same here. Doxson, I mean, he's going to be touchdown dependent. Even though he had 13 targets last week, a lot of times where he has delivered in fantasy, if he didn't get that touchdown at the end, he would have left you naked in the cold. So he's very risky. He could easily go out there and the way this Redskins offense is, have 3 catches for 20 yards, right? Not get anything in the second half, but high risk. I like it. I like the matchup. That's about it, though. Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, King out, so Roger Lewis should get a ton of targets. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually like Roger Lewis this week, and he's 3,600 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel, and he's actually had 10-plus targets in 3 straight games, which is you wouldn't know any better but by just thinking about Roger Lewis. So
if you knew that, you should get a life.
So you're telling me to get a life? Okay, so this is one of the few games where the total hasn't dropped, which is kind of surprising to me, given the weather and given nothing to play for. But the total has held steady in this game. So that gives me a little bit more confidence in Roger Lewis. And the other guy I like a lot here is Wayne Gallman, who they've been giving the youngster a lot more playing time as the season has gone on. Played 78% of the snaps last week. That's a season high. And he's actually had 6 or more catches in each of his last 3 games. So with all those injuries you talked about, the Giants receivers, he can very easily lead them in targets and catches, and he's pretty cheap. And just because no one's thinking about the Giants, I think he'll go under the radar.
You present a good case. I think at his price, worth a look. So, and I did have someone tell me just now that we never circled back with the Rob Gronkowski incentives here. So, I did pull that up just to kind of go. He'll earn $5.5 million in incentives if he can do one of the following: A, play 90% of snaps; B, make 80 catches; C, record 1,200 receiving yards; and D, make the All-Pro team. So where does he stand in regards to all those right now? Good to know. He has currently 1,084 yards in the season and 8 touchdowns. So obviously the 1,200 yards is the best bet. I think he gets it 11. I mean, he has 69 catches. Let's not forget. Gronk with 69 catches, he might not want another catch the rest of the season. That's just the type of guy he is.
Yeah, he might not even play just to preserve that number.
We'll see. We'll find out tomorrow whether Gronk values the number 69 more than a couple $1 million.
Also, just looking at his touchdown not prop, but his touchdown incentive. Like, it's nuts for somebody to have that type of number in their contract. Just shows how good of a player he is.
It's pretty nuts. I mean, he is a once-in-a-generational type of player. And a few weeks ago, I was pretty mad at him for that cheap shot he took, but I guess I'm kind of over it now, back on the Gronk train.
Yeah, we got short memories here in fantasy, so.
Cowboys versus the Eagles. This is another one of these ugly games. Huge total drop in this game. It's been down 4 points to now 39 points. It's pretty nasty, man.
Yeah, and I think it's just the Eagles resting some starters. Cowboys eliminated last week. The weather, very similar to the Giants game, 20 degrees, 10 to 15 mile an hour winds. It looks like Dallas is going to play most of their starters, except for Cole Beasley, who's dealing with the illness there. So let's keep watching reports. I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case. I don't know if they'll play all their guys. I mean, why play Zeke? Why play Dez? Why play Dak when you're out of the playoffs?
You never know. Jara could make the call. It could
Hey.
literally be a game time decision for Jerry Jones.
It could. I just don't know if I like anything really in this game. Nick Foles is going to start. They need to get him ready for the playoffs. He's only had a couple starts. He won't play the entire game.
Right.
I don't know.
It's ugly. Only thing I'd say worth considering here is Wendell Smallwood, right? He should get a majority of the RB touches. He's minimum price on both sites. And, there have been some Philly beat reporters that feel pretty confident in him getting the bulk of the work.
Yeah, that's interesting. And he's been inactive for the last few weeks, especially with Jay Ajayi back. So let's look at inactives tomorrow morning. If we see that, first, let's see if Wendell Smallwood's active, first of all. Yeah. Two, let's see if one of those other running backs, whether it's Blunt or Ajayi or Corey Clement, see if they're inactive. That would kind of give us a little tip here. And he'll be less than 1% owned, right? No one's going to have him. So that's a very, very good high risk play if you're playing, a big GPP or whatever it may be. He could be a very, very big differentiator.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as far as who might have the best info on Wendell Smallwood, could be his cousin Danny Woodhead or Danny Woodcock, part of the Smallwood and Woodcock family.
That's what we're here for.
Jaguars versus the Titans. Weather will be below freezing. Jacksonville, they don't have anything to play for, right? But they are very rah-rah, right? We're going to play to win this game. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't get it. Like, they literally locked in. They can't go up or down. I don't know. Alan Hearns, he's battling that ankle injury, and he looks like he's going to play, which is really surprising to me. They could give him another week to rest up from that high ankle sprain, but it's not the case. I don't know. These guys are old school. Tom Coughlin, Doug Marrone, they want to play their guys.
Oh, my God. So, it's hilarious to me. I mean, like, I guarantee you Tom Coughlin was like, we played the Patriots hard in Week 17, in 2007, and if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have won the Super Bowl. It's like, all right, shit. What are you going to say to that? But, yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me, right? I think this is the classic, like, old head versus, like, okay, let's kind of modernize our thinking mentality. But with that said, I kind of like the Jaguars because I think they'll go low owned, and I think Leonard Fournette is he expected to play tomorrow?
He's supposed to. He seems like one of those guys you would think they would hold out with all the foot and ankle issues that he's had, but he's expected to play. Bortles, Marquise Lee's the only one who's definitely going to be out.
Any consideration for a low owned Leonard Fournette play?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Jags passing game a little bit more just because the Titans are more beatable through the air. But
right,
I mean, yeah, we look at our projected ownership now, and this is Saturday afternoon as we're doing this, and Fournette's 2-3% projected ownership. So a guy with his talent level at that low ownership, it's hard to argue if you're making multiple high risk lineups. Yeah,
exactly, and. He has 971 yards on the season, 9 touchdowns. I know that this sounds weird and purely speculative, but maybe that 1,000 yards and 10 touchdown season means something to him. So we'll see what ends up kind of happening here. The real news here is with DeMarco Murray out, which seemed obvious to most people, although they took their time kind of saying he wouldn't play with this MCL injury, which is just really weird to me. Big workload for Derrick Henry here, and pretty good discount on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, DeMarco Murray has a legit injury. It's the third-degree MCL sprain, which is like a 6-week injury. And Mike Mularkey's like, we'll try to get him out there. It'll be a game-time decision. It's like, no, dude, like I don't care how much you love DeMarco. That's a legit injury. He's not going to be able to play. So he was ruled out on Friday. So we finally get to see Derrick Henry. The Jags, I still think they're going to rest some guys on defense. They won't play him, 100% of the snaps. So that if you're going to be able to beat them, you have to be able to run the ball. And the Titans are 3-point favorites here. So
right, they're playing for a playoff berth right here.
Yeah, so I like Henry a lot more on FanDuel, like you said, 5,800 there, 5,500 on DraftKings. We'll see if they do get down. Henry might not get passing game work. Mm-hmm. That's one of the concerns here. And you look at his ownership. His ownership is just wild. And as I pull it up here on FanDuel, he's expected 18% ownership. That's a lot more reasonable. DraftKings, we have him up to 41%. So if you're playing low risk contests, you want to lock him in on DraftKings. I like him a lot more in high risk contests on FanDuel, given that ownership.
Yeah, I like the logic there, and we'll see. I mean, this is a big game for all intents and purposes as far as the AFC playoff picture goes, and I think this game will surprise people. It'll be competitive and could come down to the wire. Bills versus the Dolphins, right? The Bills will be hoping that the Titans catch the L so they can get into the playoffs, and will they end their drought?
No.
Don't think so either. It must be tough. I mean, look, as a Skins fan, I only feel bad for Browns fans and Bills fans. Other than that, but yeah, they have a chance to at least end the season on a high note and a season with very little expectation from the beginning, and now here they are. So Kelvin Benjamin got robbed of that touchdown last week. It's pathetic, but he's expected to go. Charles Clay fully expected to play. What do you think of this Buffalo offense, considering what's at stake here?
Yeah, I like Tyrod in this game. He's ranked relatively highly in our model. Like McCoy a lot. He's at the top of our model, in fact, with all the key running backs sitting out. So like McCoy here. I don't know about Benjamin or Clay. Not enough passing volume, I don't think, to go around. I honestly like the two running backs from this game, like McCoy, and I like Kenyon Drake a whole bunch.
Yeah, Buffalo bottom ranked rush defense at home. I like Kenyon Drake here. I like McCoy. Obviously, you don't want them in the same lineups, but if you're creating a lot of high risk kind of like mass entry GPP lineups, which we don't usually recommend, but in that case, I like Kenyon Drake and I like LaShawn McCoy. Other than that, not much on the passing game I'm looking at.
No, and I think 2 points. One, Kenyon Drake, he disappointed a lot of people last week. He had 13 for 57, no receptions. And as a result, people have short memories, right? And so his projected ownership 6 to 7% this week. That's a major, major value for someone with his workload and his matchup. So he's one of my favorite plays this week. And to the second point, which you said, we don't recommend mass entry GPPs a lot, but on weeks like this where there are a ton of low-owned guys who have good matchups and good projected playing time, it's a great week to try out because you're not going to spend a ton of your bankroll this week, right? 4 to 6% maybe. You're not going to, you're not going to go broke. It's a good chance. You always hear people complain about mass multi-entry, or this is a good week to try it out. So find a lineup builder, or if you have the time to hand build it, they have 20 max entry contests on DraftKings and FanDuel, which are great if you want to make 10 to 20 lineups and try out how the pros do it. And it's really fun and gives you a lot to sweat on Sunday afternoon. Yeah,
for sure. Right. One suggestion is if you do that, don't look at your phone the whole Sunday. It'll kill you, man. Right. Bengals versus the Ravens, right? Ton of action here on Cincinnati. The line has dropped a little here. Weather, once again, it seems to be pretty common here. Below freezing temperatures, pretty windy up in, anywhere from the Midwest to the Northeast. Another one of these games. Joe Mixon did leave last week's game early with an ankle injury, and he's been limited in practice. Still a question mark for tomorrow. And if he can't go, stop. If you've heard this one before, Gio Bernard has some value.
Yeah, we'll see this. You're kind of crossing your fingers here, hoping that Mixon is out so you can play Gio. If they're both in, they'll split, and it won't be too much value on either side. And You talk about the line movement in this game. Not just DFSers, bettors have short memories too, right? The Ravens barely beat the Colts on Saturday afternoon last week. The Bengals took down the Lions, and so naturally, you get these two teams together. Ton of bets on the Bengals, right? Makes a ton of sense based on recency bias. So Baltimore's still in the playoff hunt here. Jeremy Maclin looked like he's doubtful. Chris Moore will start for him. The only guy I really like in this game is our boy Alex Collins.
Right. Couldn't agree more. A big game for the Ravens. They're playing for a lot here. Never, ever, ever bet on the Ravens passing game, period. I mean, look, like there have been weeks where Mike Wallace has delivered. That's fine. But you're going to lose more time than not. Alex Collins, however, he has a positive game script as they're close to double-digit favorites here. And the TD regression, he's kind of due for it, right? He's had 11 red zone opportunities the last 2 weeks, and he has been stuffed more than turkey on Thanksgiving. So something says he's due here, right? And at his price, he can sneak in a 100-yard, 2-touchdown game. He's been a really good running back this year, and I think still under a lot of people's radars.
Yeah, I mean, you hit all the key points here. I like him a lot, and if we just look at projected ownership, 10% on FanDuel, 20% on DraftKings. So a little bit of a discount as far as ownership goes on FanDuel. But, just given the opportunity he'll have in this game, big Alex Collins fan.
Yeah, and just please stay away from the booty-ass Ravens passing game. That's all I got to say.
Good advice.
Raiders versus the Chargers, another game where huge total drop, down 5.5 points, although it's only down to 42, right? So it had a higher start. Chargers, they are fighting for a playoff spot. A couple of question marks on this offense, though.
Yeah, the biggest thing we're going to look at tomorrow morning, and maybe tonight if Adam Schefter is so kind, is Melvin Gordon. So had that high ankle sprain. Very, very questionable for tomorrow. They called up Russell Hansbrough from the practice squad, which is generally an indicator that the team is pretty skeptical of someone's availability. Mm-hmm. Austin Eckler, he's still limited to special teams duty with his hand injury. We'll have to watch this because it's such a good matchup and such a good spot for one of these running backs. I don't know. I've seen people talk about Melvin Gordon. If he plays, they want to play him, but that's a tough injury to play through for a running back. The ideal situation here is that he sits, which I don't know if it's likely given that it's a –
What's at stake here?
Yeah, it's a do or die game. But if he does sit, Brandon Oliver, who has shown to have some fantasy value when he gets the chances, he's in a great spot here and would have a big workload.
Anytime I hear the name Brandon Oliver, I'm reminded of a few years back when he was first kind of getting on the map because of whoever the Chargers running back was at the time getting hurt. And a buddy of mine, Q, just picked him up off the waiver wire, and he was really trying to promote it. Like, oh, man, I got Brandon Olivier. He kept on calling him Brandon Olivier. So now anytime I see it, I just can't help but think Brandon Olivier. So he would have a huge workload if Gordon is out. He's very cheap. And if you're like my friend Q here, you'd think, hey, Brandon Olivier does have potential.
Yeah, I like the Brandon Olivier. Shout out to Q. But yeah, the total in this game is what's interesting. Both these teams have been playing really, really slow lately over the second half of the season. So I think that's a big reason for the total drop. What about your boy Keenan Allen? I think he's probably the only other guy I would look at here.
I love Keenan Allen. I love Keenan Allen every damn week, so I don't see why I wouldn't like him in a playoff elimination game. I mean, this guy, I think because he only has 5 touchdowns this year, people are kind of looking past him, but he has played at all-pro level. I mean, he's going to have 1,300 yards minimum when the season's over, probably get to 100 catches, considering the injuries he's dealt with. He's 25 years old. He's entering the prime of his career. He's one of my favorite receivers here in the league. And against this horrendous pass defense, yeah, why not? I'm all over him.
Yeah, I mean, 25 years old, that's so crazy considering how many season-ending injuries he's had, but he's still 25 and still very young. And like you said, we're both fans, so he's one of the top-end receivers this week.
Couldn't agree more. In fact, I plan on getting him as much exposure as maybe Deion Lewis here. So put him up there with some of the guys that I definitely want in close to half of my lineups for sure.
Sounds good. Yeah, I like that. I like that exposure level.
Cardinals versus the Seahawks. Seahawks still playing for something, right? They can get into the playoffs if somehow, I believe the Falcons blow it tomorrow, right? Is that the scenario?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Right. So, with that said, what are your thoughts on kind of how they look? They have a big line movement in their favor. Now 9.5 point favorites. They started only a touchdown favorite. Any itching to play anyone outside of Russell Wilson?
Yeah, just Russ Wilson and Baldwin, I think, are the two guys I would look at here. And
Right.
I know they haven't. You probably don't have a ton of confidence in them after the last two games they've played, but the Cardinals, you can beat them through the air pretty good, and you can't run on them as well as you can pass on them. And with the line movement here, it gives you a ton of confidence. I don't really know what the line movement here is for, other than I wrote in the Daily Plug this morning. Maybe it's just because Drew Stanton sucks that much. I don't know what else would cause the line to move this much. But Wilson's a top 3 player in our model. Doug Baldwin's going to avoid Patrick Peterson.
Right.
Just Russ Wilson's carrying his team to an historic level. The amount of offense he generates, the percentage of the offense that runs through him is pretty much unmatched in NFL history. So we'll give him one more shot here. I think he's in a good spot to. He probably has the highest percentage of being the top scoring quarterback on the slate.
Yeah, it's a damn shame. This guy's having an incredible year and would very well be in the MVP conversation if the Seahawks were a playoff team. But he still could be if they. Would you think that's out of the realm of possibilities? Let's say Seattle makes the playoffs and Russell Wilson throws 4 touchdowns tomorrow.
He certainly could be with Todd Gurley resting. Brady just struggling down the stretch here. I could see him make a push. I don't know. There's always a bias for East Coast teams, and I think there's always a bias for quarterbacks. I think it's still Brady's award to lose, but Russell Wilson can certainly make a case tomorrow.
For sure. So, yeah, like you said, Doug Baldwin, he will avoid P2 and certainly the best matchup of the wide receiver group. 49ers versus the Rams. Speaking of Todd Gurley, shout out Sean McVay, who is a little more modern with his thinking, right? Not going rah-rah and using his damn brain and saying, you know what, we're going to rest some of our important pieces here. Because you know what? It doesn't fucking matter if we beat the Niners. Now, they do have obvious line movement, right, against them because of this. And look, Jimmy Garoppolo and what the Niners have done here the last few weeks, kudos to them. They're obviously – they're playing for something. I'm not worried about the Niners kind of just half-assing this game. They're definitely playing for something.
Yeah, they're playing with a lot of confidence. And as a fan of the 49ers, you'd have to be excited about the future given what Shanahan's done, how Jimmy G looks, how the defense is playing recently. So, they're definitely playing loose. They're playing fast. And I'm not worried about them. The line movement in this game is just nuts. And 11-point swing. The Rams open 7-point favorites. McVay comes out, not even trying to be slick. Just, we're not playing our starters. Here's the guys we're not playing. We don't have to try to trick you. We're not going to try to fool you. Here's a list of the guys. You want the paper? Here it is. This is who we're not playing these guys. And so now San Francisco's a 4-point favorite. That's 11-point swing in the game. So as a result, the Rams team total is down 5.5 points. The San Francisco team total is up 5.5 points. So
pardon me. We still have house phones here. So let me go shut this off. I'll be back.
I didn't know that was a real thing. So as Walid turns off his house phone, looks like it's 1990 over there in Walid's household. So let's look here. So Jared Goff is not starting. Todd Gurley is not starting. Cooper Kupp is not playing. Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods, if they do play, they'll play a handful of snaps. Offensive tackle Andrew Whitworth is out. Offensive tackle Aaron Donald's out. So I think Walid's unplugging the phone from the wall at this point. So yeah, a lot of guys out for the Rams. They're going to rest some of their defensive starters as well. So here we got. These are the guys who are values for the Rams who are going to be starting playing a ton. Sean Mannion at quarterback. Malcolm Brown, talented guy. He's going to get the start at running back. And then Josh Reynolds and Pharaoh Cooper are going to play a ton at receiver. So Walid, just asking you as you come back from the phone debacle, what
I threw that. I threw it away. I got rid of it.
Good, just threw it out the window.
Open the window, just chucked it.
Perfect. So you and I, we both love McVay, right? Offensive genius. Even if he does pare the playbook down some, right, he still puts his offense in a position to succeed, right? So how do you feel about these low-dollar guys, Sean Mannion, Malcolm Brown, some of these receivers, with McVay coordinating them against a 49ers defense?
I like it. I like it a lot, right? Especially if you're looking at, I mean, with Mannion here, I don't know if I feel comfortable going with the quarterback, but you look at some of the skill position guys. Yeah, I love it because Sean McVay is still going to be calling the plays right now. There is still that preseason effect, right? The week before the playoffs, you're not going to be rolling, out your exotic plays that you're just waiting to kind of use in January. But with that said, like his entire scheme, his entire kind of flow of play calling is just phenomenal, and you don't lose that. Like that's not something I think you lose. There's such a drastic distinction in my eyes when I see someone like McVay calling plays and like 80-90% of other coordinators, coaches out there. So with that said, that certainly gives other guys, like a Josh Reynolds a bump, no doubt.
For sure. I mean, I love Reynolds a lot. He showed off in the preseason. Big fan of him coming out of college. Malcolm Brown. All these guys have shown off in the preseason. So I think you have to take a look at these guys. And we know with the Rams defense resting some stars, 49ers should put up some points too with Jimmy G. And as we talk about Sean McVay, let's not slight Shanahan at all. Both these guys are two of the top offensive minds in the league. So we should see points scored here regardless of who's on the field. What about the 49ers side? I think Jimmy G and Marquise Goodwin stack just makes too much sense to me.
Yeah, I love it. I think that will be very popular. That'll be very high owned. Marquise Goodwin fully healthy versus the Rams. Like I don't even know if we can call them backups, like reserve cornerbacks. So I like it. I mean, look, both of these guys, they know each other. Let's not forget that Sean McVay was a tight ends coach when Kyle Shanahan was an offensive coordinator, right? So for the Redskins, and these teams, these guys, like there's definitely some of that I can do this better than you in effect, and I like Garoppolo. I like pairing him up with your boy Marquise.
Yeah, I mean, especially after last week when against the Jags and Marquise Goodwin had been rolling up until that point. Then he runs into a tough matchup, doesn't perform, so people forget about him naturally with the recency bias, as we always talk about. So you look at Marquise Goodwin and projected ownership 4 to 5% tomorrow. That's an excellent high risk, high reward play.
Couldn't agree more. Speaking of Kyle Shanahan, let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. His old offense. They host the Carolina Panthers. Big NFC South showdown. A lot of implications here, not only for the division, but for a potential wild card spot. In fact, I'd say this is probably the biggest game of this entire slate football-wise. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think this will be the game I'll be most interested in just from a football standpoint, watching tomorrow. So curious to see how this one's going to go. The total is down in this game, down about 2 points. It's some weird line movement here. So it's off that key number of 3. It opened at Atlanta -3, but despite Carolina getting 88% of the bets, Atlanta's moved to 3.5-point favorite. So that should cause some concern if you're thinking about rostering some Panthers in this game.
Right.
I know Cam is highly rated, but they only have a 21-point team total. What do you think? Do you think he's worth playing with this line movement and with I don't know.
It's tough, right? Because he is still ranked number 1 according to our Occupy fantasy model. And if you look at the next 3 quarterbacks after him, Tom Brady, team total number 1, Drew Brees, team total number 2, Russell Wilson, team total number 9, Matthew Stafford, team total number 3. So for those reasons, I am going to kind of stay away from Cam. I think there are a lot of quote-unquote pay-up options that I like more, and it's tough for me to get really excited about a team or a quarterback when their team total is like outside the top 12. It's kind of frightening.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know he offers a lot on the ground and all this, but we've seen his downside before. Last week, didn't even throw a touchdown against the Buccaneers. Salvaged his day with the late rushing touchdown. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm off him on the just because of the line movement here, but
Mm-hmm.
the one guy I do like a lot is Julio Jones. He should probably
Right.
be the highest owned guy on the slate, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, the Panthers are just giving up tons and tons and tons of points to receivers.
Yeah, no, and one more point on Cam Newton. Um, they played week 13, and he actually only completed 13 passes, went 13 of 24, 137 yards passing.
Yeah.
He did rush for 86 yards on 9 attempts and a touchdown. That pretty much made his fantasy day there. But, I expect more of the same. Falcons are playing for a lot. I don't think Cam Newton's going to throw the ball 35, 40 times.
Yeah, I just don't see the passing upside. Sure, he can rush for a couple of touchdowns, but you know, I'm going against the model this week. We'll see if that burns me or not.
Julio Jones, I'm all in on that, though. He is a dog. He had that matchup against Lattimore that everyone was kind of saying, hey, this is the showdown, and he delivered big time. Despite quote unquote having an off year with Julio, it's always been touchdowns, right? Because
Yeah.
he very well could have a 1,500-yard year, and I promise you, if let's say you only followed the NFL by just reading headlines, right? And via Twitter, you would have never known. You would have thought Julio Jones fell off the face of the earth.
Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
we expected this even early on in the season. We knew that at the end of the day, he was going to be in the top three when it comes to yards. He's one of the greatest to play the position. And quite frankly, big game in the Dome at home. Yeah, he will be right up there with the Keenan Allen tier for me.
Yeah, I mean his ownership on just looking in the model now, projected ownership 19 to 34%. So going to be highly owned. So just keep that in mind when you are making lineups.
For sure. So, moving on to the Chiefs versus the Broncos. Kansas City, obviously, with the news of them resting some of their key players, the line has moved even more against them now. They're 4-point underdogs, and their implied team total 17 points. So below freezing, right? Division the Chiefs Broncos, they always kind of have these ugly games here. No Alex Smith, Pat Mahomes. This is it. We're gonna finally get to see what he's all about. And this game is weird for me. I don't really like too much going on. The Broncos, we don't even need to talk about anyone on Denver, but usually when a team has a lot of injury, or so not injuries, but when they're resting a lot of guys, you're like, okay, great, this is going to create a lot of opportunities, right? But I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, Sharkandrick West, we can't expect much from Kareem Hunt, right? I don't know if he's out. It looks like he won't play, but then there's Akeem Hunt. I just don't know. I don't. In a nutshell, I'm struggling to gather my thoughts here. I just don't like anyone on either team.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate because it's in a tougher matchup against the Broncos in Denver. But here's the thing: if you're going to pay cheap at a quarterback for one of these backups, why not get a guy with as much talent as Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, you could go Sean Mannion or you could go Paxton Lynch or whoever else. And it's like, why not pay for the guy that someone traded up for in the first round who's got a huge arm and can run a little bit? So I see some value in playing Mahomes in higher risk contests because, I don't know how it's happened, but the Broncos have allowed the second most passing touchdowns this year. Not really sure how that's the case with their defense, but I would play Mahomes. But like you said, it's just some of these starters could play, some couldn't. The team total is down to 17 points. Just really not a ton to get excited about, though.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. I mean, you could talk me into Mahomes. I just think there are a lot of other guys that I do like that have a lot to play for, and maybe in one lineup.
Well, let me ask you this: if you're paying down at quarterback, and not even saying you have to, just because there are other values out there, like
Right.
Just like Malcolm Brown, et cetera. So, would you play Mahomes, Paxton Lynch, or would you play Sean Mannion?
It's a good question. I'd say Mahomes, right? Although I'd probably pick Jacoby Brissett over both, if that kind of counts in that same tier,
Oh, for
right?
Sure. I would too.
But I'm more so interested to watch Pat Mahomes play. I think he has incredible talent. He very well could be the Chiefs quarterback next year. Let's not look. There's pressure on this start, right? We know the Broncos haven't been as good as they have in the past, but Look, there's a lot to play for. Pat Mahomes has been waiting all season to get this opportunity, and let's not make it like a Week 17 nothing to play for type of game. Like there will be pressure on him, so we'll see how he delivers. Nothing against him if he doesn't. There are other directions I like going at quarterback.
I think that's fair. Yeah, just like as we said before, 16 games, tons of options this week. Don't feel the need to, to pigeonhole yourself into one player or another if you don't fully buy in.
Saints versus the Buccaneers. A lot of money on Tampa Bay. The spread has fell from -9 New Orleans to -6.5. Although the Saints still have the second highest implied team total. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I don't know. I was writing about this in the plug this morning, and I just don't know why this line is dropping so much. The Saints are playing for the division title. The Bucs really haven't shown much resistance. I know they played Cam Newton pretty well last week, but I don't know. I don't know what to make of that line move, but I just do know that I want a piece of the running game here for New Orleans, either Kamara or Ingram, as we always talk about it. But the surprising thing to me is that Kamara's gotten more touches than Ingram the last 2 weeks, and if that continues to be the case, he becomes a clear guy here.
Yeah, I think it could easily just tilt on us though, and I don't know. This backfield, the one thing I can predict is they're going to be freaking good, and they're going to deliver. So I'll have solid exposure to both. I do love that the Saints are playing at the same time, as this is one thing the NFL. Hey, a round of applause. You guys got this thing right a few years ago. For that reason, we definitely expect the Saints to kind of full steam ahead here. Yep. The Bucs, they suck. They're bringing back Dirk Cutter. I was a little surprised, but hey, some people like hanging on to their trash. It's all good. But yeah, I think the Saints have a lot to play for in this running game here. I expect multiple touchdowns from hopefully a good mix, right? But it could easily be Alvin Kamara getting 2.
Yeah, I think the running game's the big thing here. Just you want to get exposure for making multiple lineups to both Ingram and Kamara. Not really much else I like here. What are you in on Michael Thomas at all? I know the hamstring limited him last week. Do you think he's back to full snaps this week, or do you think he's worth taking the risk on?
Once again, high risk contest. I can see him be worth a play. Don't overexpose yourself. Look, hamstring injuries are a little tough. The Saints aren't playing for everything. They're playing for something, right? And if he tweaks it during the game, he might, they might not give him the same amount of snaps. He did obviously only have 67% of snaps last week, and that accrued to 5 targets. So I just say that as far as this game goes, I don't think the Saints will even need to throw the ball. Like, the Bucs are already packing it in. This game will be over at halftime. The Saints will be up 35-0. Mark Ingram will have 2 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara will have 2 touchdowns. And there's no reason for Michael Thomas to even run a go route.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know if he'll need to play that much. So that's a good point. And maybe I'll limit my exposure a little bit now that you say that. It makes a good point.
The Bucs are trash in a nutshell.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's
and
for sure.
Their season is over, just like our series of podcasts for this entire season. Now, we'll obviously be back to the playoffs, but this has been a fun 17 weeks, ups and downs, a lot of crazy shit happening. The NFL, as always, delivering the soap opera we expect.
Yeah, every single week. We make our bold calls and we come back the next week even more surprised at the things that happen throughout the rest of the week. So, it's been a lot of fun working with you during the NFL regular season. It's been a grind for sure. We'll be here for the playoffs, and as the NHL continues to roll along,
right,
we'll put out some more periscopes there. And as MLB comes, we'll have a weekly MLB periscope, and a weekly MLB podcast. So lots of stuff here in the future for Occupy Fantasy. We'll be changing some things up for the new year, so be on the lookout for that.
Absolutely.
But I think we need to make our final 2017 bowl calls here so we can end the year on a high note.
Let's do it. You first.
All right. Here we go. Cleveland Browns get their first win.
Oh, God.
In true Hugh Jackson fashion, doesn't live up to his word, and he doesn't jump in the lake as he predicted he would.
Oh, he said he would?
Before the season started. Yeah, they said if they go 1-15 again, he'll jump in the lake. Oh, so he'll weasel his way out of that.
Well, now I'm rooting for it. Now I'm sure as hell rooting for it. I didn't know that caveat there. That
Yeah.
That's more exciting than anything the Browns can offer fantasy owners. So go Browns there. I will say, and it's weird making these bold predictions when like me saying the 49ers are beating the Rams. That's not a bold prediction. Like the
Right.
Rams are resting all their starters. So I really have to dig deep here, and you might reject this one, but I think I am going to go with the Jaguars beating the Titans. Does that count? Does that kind of count?
I think they're underdogs. Sure. Yeah, I'll count it. I'll count it. Even though the Titans will try to lose this game as hard as they can, I'll count it.
I
The
just
road
I,
underdogs.
I just truly think Tom Coughlin will be on the field, and like if anyone of the Jaguar starters gets benched, Tom Coughlin is coming down to the field and, and making sure they play their hearts out. So,
Yep.
what about fantasy performer?
All right, so I'm gonna go. It's gonna be a twofold here. So for DraftKings, Wayne Gallman for the
Okay.
Giants is gonna be a top 12 running back this week, and on
Mhm.
FanDuel scoring Malcolm Brown of the Rams is going to be a top 12 running back.
I like it. Now, my bold prediction, it's not that bold because considering who we're talking about, but I think Julio Jones goes for 200 yards tomorrow.
I like it. Please, I hope that happens.
Remember, he had 300 against the Panthers last season, right?
Yeah, it's when he mossed Kuechly down the field. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was. I believe
I,
it.
I'm just seeing another one of those games. So, but yeah, that's it for us. It's been real fun. Obviously, 2018, we have a lot of new things kind of on the horizon, especially with our model and our daily plug. But also, as far as how we're rolling out content, as always, we can't explain how much we really appreciate the feedback we've gotten. It's helped us in our early stages, kind of tweak what we're doing, and we look at it as it's like fantasy, right? There isn't one perfect formula. You always have to be, reevaluating yourself and looking at what you can do to improve.
Yeah, as always, we really value the feedback. We do this. We don't have Occupy Fantasy to make money, right? We do it to really help people. That's why we started it. To help people grow their bankroll and be profitable players. So any way we can help you do that, any way we can adjust how we present our content, we're certainly all ears. So thank you for this entire season so far. It's been great for us. We appreciate everyone listening and following and subscribing. So thanks to you. This podcast, like I said, it's live now, but it'll be available for download later and before Sunday morning. Just once again, appreciate all of you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys January 2nd if you are entered in the $33 NHL DFS tournament. It is our favorite one. I know Brian has won it before. I think I'm gonna look to take it this time in 2018.
Okay, I will settle for second in that case. I'll let you win this one. And hopefully a couple of our subscribers get some top 10s in there as well.
Absolutely. All right, my friend.
Walid, take care. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone. And remember, all the content's at OccupyFantasy.com. It's free this week for NFL. So take care. Enjoy. Good luck. Be safe.
Happy New Year, guys, and we'll see you soon.